The blood-red sunset burned across the Wyoming Territory like dying embers, as Archer Thornton spotted the lone hat tumbling across the empty plain, a stark reminder of the man who'd worn it into battle but never returned. It was 1878, 3 years after the Great Sioux War had claimed countless lives, and Archer had promised Thomas Miller he'd return his prized possession to his wife should anything happen to him. Now, holding the worn Stetson in his calloused hands, Archer knew he had a promise to keep even if it meant walking 50 miles through unforgiving country to reach the Miller homestead. The autumn wind cut through Archer's wool coat as he trudged along the barely visible trail. His horse had gone lame 2 days back, forcing him to continue on foot with only his rifle, canteen, and the supplies he could carry on his back. At 32, Archer was no stranger to hardship. 10 years of driving cattle, breaking horses, and occasional bounty hunting had hardened his body and weathered his face, but the burden he now carried weighed heavier than any physical load. He had fought alongside Thomas Miller in the waning days of the war. They weren't soldiers, just two cowboys who'd gotten caught up defending a settlement. Thomas had taken a Sioux arrow through the chest. Before he died, he'd pressed his hat into Archer's hands. "Give it to Sophia," he'd whispered through blood-flecked lips. "Tell her I'm sorry." Archer had been tracking a group of rustlers for the past month when he'd learned where the Miller homestead was located. The widow had moved from their original home in Montana Territory down to Wyoming, trying to make a fresh start. As night fell, Archer made camp beside a small creek, using Thomas's hat as a pillow. The stars overhead seemed unusually bright, as if watching his journey with interest. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of battles long past and promises still unkept. Dawn broke gray and cold. Frost covered the ground as Archer continued his journey, following the crude map a storekeeper in the last town had drawn for him. The Miller place was nestled in a small valley near the foothills, good land with water access, but isolated. Too isolated for a woman alone, he thought. By midday, Archer spotted smoke rising from a distant chimney. The homestead came into view as he crested a small hill, a modest cabin with a barn, corral, and what looked like the beginnings of a vegetable garden. A figure moved in the yard, chopping wood with determined strokes. Archer paused, surprised. The figure was clearly a woman, Sophia Miller. He presumed splitting logs with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd been forced to learn survival skills quickly. As he approached, she noticed him and immediately dropped the axe, retrieving a rifle that had been propped against the woodpile. She aimed it squarely at his chest. "That's far enough, stranger," she called, her voice firm despite the slight tremor in it. "State your business." Archer stopped, slowly raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "Mrs. Miller, Sophia Miller," the rifle didn't waver. "Who's asking?" "Name's Archer Thornton. I knew your husband." Her posture stiffened. "Thomas has been dead nearly a year." "I know, madam. I was with him when he fell." Archer carefully reached into his coat and pulled out the hat. "He asked me to bring you this." Sophia Miller lowered the rifle slightly, her eyes fixed on the battered Stetson. She was younger than Archer had expected, perhaps 25, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her face showed the weathering of frontier life, but retained a striking beauty accentuated by sharp green eyes that missed nothing. "You walked all this way to bring me a hat?" she asked, suspicion evident in her voice. "I made a promise," Archer said simply. Sophia studied him for a long moment before slowly lowering the rifle. "Come on in, then. Looks like you could use some coffee." The interior of the cabin was modest but meticulously maintained. A small stove provided heat, and handmade furniture occupied the single room. A curtain partitioned off what Archer assumed was her sleeping area. Everything spoke of careful stewardship with limited resources. As she prepared coffee, Archer noticed her hands strong, calloused, yet unmistakably feminine. She moved with efficiency, a woman who had learned to survive by herself. "How did you find me?" she asked, placing a steaming mug before him. "Wasn't easy. Tracked down your old neighbors in Montana. They said you'd moved south after Thomas passed. Took some asking around, but people remembered a widow heading this way with a wagon full of belongings." Sophia sat across from him, her eyes never leaving the hat he'd placed on the table between them. Thomas loved that hat, wore it everywhere. She reached out but stopped short of touching it. "He said it was lucky." "Not lucky enough, I'm afraid," Archer said softly, her eyes flashed to his. "Were you there when it happened?" Archer nodded slowly. "We were helping defend a small settlement, Sioux war party. Thomas fought brave." "That sounds like him, always rushing to help." A bitter smile crossed her face. "Even when it wasn't his fight, he spoke of you, at the end." Archer hesitated, uncertain how much to share. "Asked me to tell you he was sorry." Sophia's composure cracked for just a moment. She looked away, blinking rapidly. "Sorry for dying? Or sorry for leaving me to manage this place alone?" "Both, I reckon." She took a deep breath, recovering herself. "Well, you've delivered his hat and his message. I appreciate you keeping your word, Mr. Thornton." "Archer, please." "Archer." She nodded. "You're welcome to rest here tonight before you head back. The barn's got clean hay." "Thank you, madam." Outside, the wind picked up, whistling around the cabin's corners. Archer noticed the unfinished repairs on the roof, the leaning fence posts, the countless tasks that required a man's strength or a woman with twice the determination to compensate. "Storm's coming," Sophia observed, looking out the small window. "First snow of the season, maybe." As if summoned by her words, white flakes began drifting past the glass. Within minutes, the air was thick with swirling snow, the landscape quickly disappearing under a blanket of white. "Looks like you might be staying more than one night," Sophia said, her expression unreadable. The blizzard raged for 3 days. Archer insisted on earning his keep, helping Sophia with the endless chores required to maintain the homestead. Together, they moved livestock into the barn, secured loose boards, and ensured they had enough firewood to outlast the storm. On the evening of the 3rd day, as they sat by the fire, Sophia finally reached for Thomas's hat, running her fingers along the brim. "We were married 5 years," she said quietly. "Started out in St. Louis. Thomas had big dreams of land and cattle. We came west with nothing but hopes." She looked up at Archer. "How did you know him?" "Met on a cattle drive in '75, both working for the same outfit. He talked about you constantly, his beautiful bride waiting back at the homestead. He was always a smooth talker." Sophia smiled faintly. "Less skilled at actually building that dream he sold me," he tried. "Yes, he did," she sighed. "But trying isn't enough out here, is it? You have to succeed or the land takes everything." When the storm finally broke, Archer helped Sophia dig out paths to the barn and well. The winter had arrived early and with unusual force. The valley lay buried under nearly 3 feet of snow. "You should stay until the pass clears," Sophia said as they surveyed the transformed landscape. "No sense in freezing to death trying to leave. I wouldn't want to impose." "It's not imposition, it's practicality. Besides," she added, looking at the countless tasks ahead of them, "I could use the help." Days stretched into weeks. The brutal Wyoming winter settled in with a vengeance, bringing more storms and temperatures that froze water solid in seconds. Archer repaired the barn roof, reinforced the livestock pens, and taught Sophia how to set traps for rabbits to supplement their dwindling food stores. In the evenings, They sat by the fire, talking or sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. Archer learned that Sophia had grown up in Boston, the daughter of a schoolteacher who had instilled in her a love of books. She had a small collection of prized possessions carried carefully across the country. "Read to me," Archer requested one night, "if you wouldn't mind." Sophia looked surprised. "You enjoy literature." "Never had much schooling," he admitted, "but I like stories." She selected a volume of Tennyson and began to read, her voice taking on a musical quality that transported them both far from the isolated cabin. Archer watched her face in the firelight, captivated by the animation that transformed her features as she read. As December gave way to January, they established routines. Archer hunted when weather permitted, bringing back deer and elk to smoke for preservation. Sophia tended to their meager livestock: 3 chickens, a milk cow, and a stubborn mule. Together they survived the harshest winter either had experienced. One evening, as a particularly fierce wind howled outside, Sophia asked about Archer's life. "What keeps a man wandering instead of settling down?" Archer stared into his coffee. "Never found a reason to stop, I suppose. No sweetheart waiting somewhere," was a girl once in Texas. "Her father had other ideas about who she should marry. So you've been alone." "Mostly. Suits me fine." Sophia studied him. "Does it? Really?" The question lingered between them, unanswered. January brought brief respites between storms, days of brilliant sunshine that made the snow-covered landscape sparkle like diamonds. During one such clear spell, they ventured to the nearest trading post, a full day's journey by sleigh. The small settlement was barely more than a cluster of buildings, but it represented their only contact with the outside world. As they approached, Sophia grew tense. "Problem?" Archer asked. "Simon Wade runs the trading post. He's been persistent since Thomas died." Archer understood immediately. A widow with property would be considered a prime opportunity by frontier standards. The trading post was crowded with settlers taking advantage of the good weather. Heads turned when Sophia entered with Archer at her side. A burly man behind the counter frowned at the sight of them. "Mrs. Miller, didn't expect to see you before spring." His eyes shifted to Archer. "Who's your friend?" "Archer Thornton," she replied. "He's staying at my place until the weather breaks." Whispers immediately circulated through the room. Sophia lifted her chin, ignoring them as she handed Simon a list of supplies they needed. As Simon filled their order, a well-dressed man approached. "Mrs. Miller, good to see you. I was concerned about you out there alone." "I'm managing fine, Mr. Peterson." Sophia's tone was polite but distant. "So I see." Peterson eyed Archer with obvious disapproval. "The bank's offer on your property still stands. Might be wise to consider it before spring planting." Sophia tensed. "My answer hasn't changed. The land is not for sale." After completing their business and loading the sleigh, they started the journey back. Sophia remained silent until they were well away from the settlement. "They're trying to force me out," she finally said. "Peterson represents the cattle company that wants my water rights. They've been pressuring me since Thomas died." "Is that why you have the rifle ready when strangers approach?" She nodded. "They've sent men before, not to hurt me, just to scare me, make me feel I can't manage alone." "And can you manage alone?" Sophia looked across the snowy expanse toward her distant homestead. "I have to." February brought a devastating setback. During a bitter cold snap, the barn caught fire from a lantern knocked over during morning chores. Archer and Sophia worked desperately to save the animals and what feed they could, but by the time they extinguished the blaze, half the structure stood in charred ruins. Sophia sat in the snow, face smudged with soot, staring at the smoking remains. "It's too much," she whispered. Maybe they're right. Maybe I can't do this. Archer knelt beside her. We'll rebuild. With what? The nearest sawmill is 40 miles away. I don't have money for lumber. There's timber on your north ridge. We can cut it ourselves. She looked at him, noticing his use of we but not commenting on it. That would take weeks. Then we better get started, he said, offering his hand to help her up. Working from sunrise to sunset, they felled trees, stripped bark, and hauled logs down to the homestead. Archer taught Sophia to use an adze to shape the rough timber. Their hands bled and muscles screamed with exhaustion, but day by day, the barn began to rise again. During these long workdays, something shifted between them. Conversation flowed more easily. Occasionally, their hands would brush, lingering a moment too long to be accidental. One evening, exhausted from labor, Sophia stumbled. Archer caught her, his arms circling her waist. They stood frozen, faces inches apart, breath forming small clouds in the cold air. For a moment, Archer thought he might wanted to kiss her, but instead he gently set her upright. "Thank you," she murmured, not stepping away. "Sophia," he began, then stopped, uncertain what to say. She reached up, her gloved hand resting against his cheek. "It's all right," she said softly, though neither of them was sure what she meant. As February gave way to March, subtle signs of approaching spring appeared. The days grew longer. The relentless cold eased, bringing periods of thaw. Patches of ground emerged from beneath the snow. The new barn stood complete, smaller than the original but sturdy. Together they had accomplished what neither could have done alone. "I should be moving on soon," Archer said one evening, though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Sophia was silent for a long moment. "Is that what you want?" "It's what I do. Never stayed in one place long. And if I asked you to stay," the question hung between them, changing everything. "Why would you?" he asked. Sophia set aside her sewing and faced him directly. "Because I've grown accustomed to your presence. Because this place works better with you in it." She took a breath. "Because I think you feel something for me as I do for you." Archer stared into the fire. "Thomas was my friend and my husband, but he's been gone over a year, Archer. Am I supposed to be alone forever?" "No, but I loved him," she continued. "Part of me always will, but I'm still living, and this winter has shown me I don't want to live alone." Archer stood, needing distance to sort through his conflicting emotions. "I'm not a settler, Sophia. Never farmed a day in my life before coming here." "You're a quick study." She smiled faintly. "Besides, this valley has good grazing, could support a small herd. A man who knows cattle might make something of it." The possibility of staying, of building something permanent, both terrified and tempted him. "I need to think," he said, heading outside. The night air was crisp but lacked winter's brutal edge. Stars crowded the sky, impossibly bright. Archer walked to the newly rebuilt barn, running his hand along the rough timber walls they had raised together. Thomas's hat hung on a peg inside the cabin. Every night, Archer had looked at it, feeling his friend's presence, wondering if pursuing feelings for Sophia would betray the promise he'd made. But the promise had been to bring the hat, to deliver the message. Not to deny the widow any chance at happiness. When he returned to the cabin, Sophia was waiting, her face illuminated by firelight. "I've been wandering most of my life," Archer said. "Never thought I'd find a place that felt like it could be home." "And now?" she asked. "Now I'm not so sure." He moved closer. "If I stayed, people would talk. Let them. Peterson and his cattle company won't stop pressuring you." "Us," she corrected. "They would be pressuring us, and together we'd be harder to intimidate." Archer took her hands in his. They were work-roughened like his own, bearing witness to her determination to survive in this harsh land. "I'm not Thomas," he said quietly. "I don't want you to be," she replied. "I want you to be Archer, the man who walked 50 miles to keep a promise." the man who stayed through winter and rebuilt what was broken. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home after years of wandering. Her arms circled his neck as she drew him closer, her body molding against his with an urgency that matched his own. Later, as they lay together beneath warm quilts, Archer traced the contours of her face in the dying firelight. "I never expected this," he admitted. "When I found that hat, I was just keeping a promise to a friend." "And now?" Sophia asked, nestling against his chest. "Now I'm making a promise to you, and to myself." The remainder of March brought the full awakening of spring. The snow retreated to shadowed places, and the land emerged renewed. Streams swelled with meltwater. The first green shoots pushed through the softening earth. Together they prepared for planting. Archer repaired the plow while Sophia sorted seeds saved from the previous year's harvest. They discussed plans for expanding the garden, adding a smokehouse, and perhaps acquiring a few head of cattle to start a small herd. As March ended, they rode together to the trading post. The settlement was bustling with spring activity. This time, when they entered side by side, Sophia wore Thomas's wedding ring on a chain around her neck, and a new silver band on her finger, a simple circle Archer had fashioned from a coin. Simon Wade's eyebrows rose at the sight of them. "Heard rumors you two had become friendly." "Mr. Thornton and I were married last week," Sophia said clearly, her voice carrying through the suddenly quiet store. Peterson emerged from a back room, his face darkening. "Rather quick, wouldn't you say, Mrs. Miller?" "It's Mrs. Thornton now," she corrected. "And I don't recall asking your opinion on the matter." Peterson's forced smile didn't reach his eyes. "The cattle company's offer still stands. Though I must inform you the price has decreased, considering the damaged condition of the barn." "Barn's been rebuilt," Archer said. "Better than before, and the property's not for sale." "Perhaps you should consider—" "The lady said it's not for sale," Archer interrupted, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable edge. "Now we need supplies." News of their marriage spread quickly through the territory. Some disapproved of the widow's quick remarriage. Others understood the practical necessity of partnership in frontier life. A few recognized the genuine affection between them. April brought a letter from the East, a response to one Sophia had sent weeks earlier. Her sister would be traveling west with her husband and children, considering settlement in the territory. For the first time, Sophia would have family nearby. "We'll need to add a room to the cabin," she said, already planning. "And perhaps a proper cooking range if we can afford it." Archer smiled, watching her excitement. "Whatever you want." "What I want," she said, wrapping her arms around his waist, "is what I have, this land, this life." She looked up at him. On a warm day in late April, Archer rode to the ridge overlooking their valley. The homestead below was transformed by spring fields freshly plowed, fruit trees blossoming, new life emerging everywhere he looked. Thomas's hat was secured to his saddle. He'd carried it with him, feeling it was time to properly lay his friend to rest. Finding a spot with a view of the entire valley, he dismounted. "I kept my promise, Thomas," he said aloud. "Brought your hat to Sophia, told her you were sorry." He paused, feeling a bit foolish talking to the air, yet needing to say the words. "I never planned to fall in love with her. Never planned to stay, but here I am." He placed the hat on a rock facing the homestead. "I'll look after her, build something good here, the kind of place you dreamed about." The wind caught the hat, threatening to carry it away. Archer quickly retrieved it, reconsidering. Thomas had worn this hat working cattle, courting Sophia, building their homestead. Perhaps it wasn't meant to be discarded. When he returned to the cabin, Sophia was kneading bread dough. Flour dusted her arms and a streak of it marked her cheek. To Archer, she had never looked more beautiful. "I thought you were going to leave the hat on the ridge," she said, noticing it still in his hands. "Changed my mind." He hung it on its accustomed peg. "Seems like it belongs here, with us." Sophia wiped her hands and crossed to him, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "Like you," she murmured against his lips. "Like me," he agreed, holding her close. Outside, the Wyoming spring unfurled in vibrant greens and wildflower blooms. Inside the small cabin, a different kind of growth continued the careful cultivation of love between two people who had found each other against all odds. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching twilight paint the western sky, Sophia took Archer's hand. "When you first arrived with that hat, I never imagined you'd stay." "Neither did I," he admitted. "Thought I'd deliver it and be on my way." "I'm glad you didn't leave." Archer squeezed her hand. "The winter kept me here, but you're what made me stay." As darkness fell, they remained on the porch, planning their future in the valley that had brought them together. The cowboy who had walked miles to deliver a hat had found something he never expected: a home, a purpose, and a love worth staying for long after spring had returned to the land.